Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Chatting with Us. This is episode number 47. And before we begin, I do want to remind everyone to hit the like video on this and subscribe if you're not subscribed. These tend to not get pushed as much on YouTube because they're live streams for whatever reason. So I'd like to reach some more people. So if you don't mind helping me out, smack the like button and all that good stuff. But tonight, we are joined by someone who just seems to be racking up the W's when it comes to 2023. And that is the newest member of the 20K Subs Club.
Ooh.
One of the best booktubers we got here in the fantasy realm. And also, very soon, will be a published author. And that is my dear friend, Dr. Philip Chase. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. It is fantastic to be here. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else today. Because, I am in the mood to celebrate a little bit. It was today that the channel hit 20,000. So wow, I'm extremely grateful. And people are riffing off of the your little joke with Alan there about somehow when I hit 20K, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. And I was going to do this thing where I came on and said, Jimmy, sorry, this is really awkward, but I actually, we can't talk tonight because I hit 20K today. So,
well, I did make backup plans. I said, just in case Philip pulls out, because I saw your little community post, and I said, there it is. I said he's going to pull out. So I did have, I had George R. R. Martin on the back burner.
Yeah.
But, I said, Philip showed up. I said, Georgie Porgy, go play some railroad stuff.
He was waiting, wasn't he?
He was.
Can I please?
It was sad, honestly. Like, he was like, can I just drop in for a minute? I was like, George, no. I said, we're talking about the new generation of fantasy authors here. We're talking about the man leading the charge.
Yeah. The funny thing was, after I posted that thank you for the 20K, somebody unsubscribed to me.
You always gotta wait. You gotta wait and get like 10 over.
Somebody unsubscribed, but then it went back up again. So we're good. But I thought that was very funny. So.
That is very funny. I have purposely tried to always. I might take a screenshot at the flat number, but if I'm gonna post something, I always wait till it's like 5 to 10 over because I know there's someone out there that wants to ruin my day.
Yeah.
It is funny. Every time you post a video, do you lose subscribers?
Yeah, but I mean, it depends. If I've had a recent bunch of subscribers, then it tends to be the case where the next video comes out, I'll lose some. That's part of the deal, I guess. And it was actually something weird happened this week. I haven't even figured it out. So if anybody in the chat knows what this was, please tell me. I feel like somebody big must have given me a shout out somewhere, and I don't know where or who. Because I got a bunch of subscribers this week on it was, I think, Tuesday and Wednesday, maybe. But it was, you know how that is when you see a spike, and it wasn't anything I did, because I think that was the day I reviewed David Gemmel's Legend, which is, it's a review. It's not going to exactly, drive the numbers or anything like that. There was nothing like what I saw. So it's just like, where's, usually I can figure out somebody's, tag me somewhere or something. But this time there was just this really, it is, everybody knows, I think, how powerful it is when, was it Murphy?
It probably was Murphy.
It probably was Murphy. And maybe where did she do it though? I don't know, because I looked all over the place. I was like, who did this? And I was thinking maybe Murphy, but I don't know where. Maybe to her Patreon. Maybe
could be Patreon, but also because you all are doing Vinland Saga together, and you guys go back and forth between each other's channels. Is that right?
Yeah.
So there's a chance that maybe one of those videos just got hit by the algorithm and it got pushed. You know what I mean? So it could even have been an older one.
Okay.
So that's probably what happened.
It's a mystery to me. Oh, Evie told me it was her. And all her bots.
It was Evie. It was Bald Booktuber. And honestly, I would say that your first appearance on this show in 2023 had a lot to do with it.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Maybe that's the one that went viral.
I'm a giver. I like to give people the opportunity and the platform.
Yeah. Well, whoever it was, I just want to thank that person. Thank you very much. I'll find out eventually. But
Well, I feel like if there's ever been a time for you to get a little bit of a boost and a little bit of a peak is the fact that, in just a few months, you're going to be releasing your first ever book.
Yeah, actually, under 2 months. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's coming up quick. How are you feeling about it?
I am very, very excited, and I have a few things to share with people. One, and I've told people I will be doing this, so no big surprises here. But one is that I'll be making a video soon with the individual who is making the map for me, and I'm so excited for that. That is Jack Shepard. And I mentioned before that he is doing he's done a first law map for the a special edition that's coming out.
Nice.
Of the first law books. So he's good. He knows what he's doing. He's just a wonderful person too. And so it's been a real pleasure working with him. And I initially thought that I have hired an artist to do the cover art, and that's almost done. So I'm really excited about that for the first book. And I'm really just so excited. And I initially thought maybe I could do the cover design myself, but the more I discovered about that, the more I realized I need help. And so Jack Shepard stepped in there as well, and he's really done a fantastic job with the cover design too. So I'm really excited. So we will have a map video. And then I will have a cover reveal, which I think I'll make it into a kind of a book trailer thing. Because there's this wonderful individual who does medieval music on YouTube. And the channel's name is Ravenskjold, which is good, Old Norse for Raven Shield. And probably a lot of people out there know, if you're into fantasy or into medieval stuff, Ravenskjold. But he reached out to me, and he just this YouTube has some wonderful people. There are some just really amazing people. And he said, "Hey, I have some music for you. If you want to use it for like a book trailer or something." I was like, "Really?" And it was like, wow. It was just so generous and so nice.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some really wonderful people out there, including yourself, including you, Jimmy. I'm going to be leaning on you for some help, some expertise as well, for something that I'm very excited to work with you on.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about that today. We got to get those details, and I got to start scrapping something together. But the generosity on YouTube, and especially in our community, has been probably the most astounding thing since I've started this channel. Not just for myself, but helping Alan through his rec, seeing the support for you whenever you're doing something that obviously you have a lot of passion for. I think I have underestimated most of my life the generosity of people, and it kind of gives you a little bit of hope in humanity a bit, doesn't it?
It really does. I am continually astounded at the kindness and the generosity of so many people in this community. And yes, of course, there are the occasional comments that you have to delete or people you have to block, but 99% plus of my interactions here have been very, very positive. And I learned so much, and it's just so much, it's overwhelmingly, I have to, when I released my announcement of the publication of the 3 books, I got all these beautiful messages of support from so many people. I've never had as many messages or what are they called? Comments.
Yes, that is what they're called.
That's what they're called. I never had so many comments on a video, and they were all so supportive and so beautiful. And it moved me to tears. I did not expect to read comments and get emotional like that. But it was a really beautiful thing for me. And I'm just so grateful to be part of this community.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was moved watching people support you and knowing how hard that you have worked on. I mean, me and you, I remember we talked over breakfast when we were at ICFA last year, and I was telling you my crackpot idea for a story. And then that's really when I got to hear a lot more about, your writing and how this story came to be and all the work that you'd put into it and everyone that had helped you along the way, like AP. And
oh my goodness, AP has been vital. I mean, he's been such a a wonderful resource, and his editorial skills are just amazing. I mean, I really feel like I was so fortunate to meet him and to have his expert eyes look at that. And yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any drastic changes, but these little things here and there definitely make the story stronger. So I really feel like the book is about as great as I can make it with help from AP.
Yeah, there's a story behind the story, and both are almost equally interesting to me, to watch someone kind of chase something that they've been after for so very long. And Tanner says he was already hyped enough for your books, but now that Alan, which for those who don't know, I mean, I guess we can say it here because not everybody watches everything. Alan, our favorite guest here on Chat with Nuts, our semi-permanent co-host, is actually going to be the audiobook narrator for Philip's series. And I just think that is such a great thing. It's so on brand, and I think it's going to bring a whole lot of value to those audiobooks.
I so agree. I am so excited, and I have to give you some credit too for that, because you're the one that first whispered in my ear, I think Alan would be a good audiobook narrator. So it's all credit to Jimmy for floating that idea in the first place. And I think Alan's going to be brilliant. He was born for this. And there are certain voices people are going to see. I think even when the books come out, because the audiobooks won't be out until much later, until the first one will probably be late summer. But I think people are going to, if they read the book, say, oh, Alan is going to be perfect for that character. There are certain characters that Alan is just going to be perfect for. So I'm so excited. I know for a fact that he is he's getting into this role pretty seriously now. I know he's getting some equipment, and he's getting himself all prepared. And I have to send him not only an arc, but I'm going to have to send him basically the interior of the book as soon as it's ready, so that he can start reading it and practicing those voices. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think.
I would really like to get the uncut version. Like, I know we're going to get some nice, finished product that's going to be up on Audible or wherever it might go.
Yeah,
I would like to get the uncut where, like, you hear a break in the pause and really, Philip, really?
Yeah. No, we're going to get some side commentary in there, and that would be great.
Now, are there going to be any, this is vague spoilers. Is there going to be any maybe intimate moments, sexy times in these books?
It's so funny. But that was one of the questions Alan had. So here's the deal with sexy time.
Oh, we're getting the birds and the bees.
All right, everybody.
Buckle up.
Actually, the truth is, I do not have any explicit, just like total out there descriptions of the intimate act. I do not. I actually tried to write that and realized this is awkward. I don't really think I need to inflict this on anybody. So I basically said, I think these people deserve some privacy. My characters were telling me we want our privacy. And so, if there are ever any moments that call for that sort of thing, then it happens off page. So mostly.
There are many people who are disappointed because they thought maybe they were getting 50 Shades of Chase, and they are in fact not. The Shades of Adon will not
I'm
be.
So sorry. I'm so sorry to disappoint all those readers. Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know about you, Jimmy, but when I read books that have those scenes and the authors try to do them really, sometimes I think it's very hard to do well, first of all.
Yeah.
I'm sure it can be done. I do not personally object to that sort of thing. I don't object to sex. I'm not a Puritan or anything, but it just feels like it's so hard to do well. And there are certain books I think that I've read where there was a sex scene put in there, and it just felt so almost like comedic. It wasn't supposed to be, though, so that's not good, right?
Well, we've all had that happen. I mean,
yeah. You mean in books or in real life?
In real life, you know, you're
Oh,
living
yeah.
through the text. The book reads you. You know what I mean? Here's a question for you. There are violence in your books for sure, right?
Well, it's fantasy, epic fantasy, so it'd be hard. And there's a holy war going on, so yeah, it's not a pillow fight.
It's not a pillow. I like that a lot. Also, my dad says, congratulations. You are his favorite booktuber, by the way.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, that's huge. Thank you so much. Wow.
He's reading through Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb, and
oh, cool.
It's his new favorite author. And yeah, he said, I like the way Philip talks about books. It makes sense to me. And I said, I do too. I do too.
Well, I consider that the highest praise, and I'm very grateful.
You're very lovable, Philip. You're very, very lovable.
Oh,
my question about violence is not. Don't worry, this isn't like a pointed question. But what do you think it is that makes, from the outside, I guess, writing something that involves like a romantic scene more difficult than writing violence or battles or action? Like, why is that so much harder?
I think not that violence can't be intimate, because it sometimes can be.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just a part of what we're used to, I guess. I mean, we in fantasy are pretty used to violence. And I will say that I try to make the violence that happens in my books not be sterile or stylized, or I try to make it as real and visceral as I can. So it's not glorified, I hope that I've achieved that. Yeah, I don't know. There's something, I guess, very intimate and very private about, for most people, about sex. And so it's just something we maybe don't necessarily want invading our other reading spaces or activities, or I guess, I don't know. I just felt that when I was trying to write those scenes, I just thought, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. And I don't want to kick my reader out of the story. That's certainly the last thing you want to do as a writer. So I thought that it was the best choice ultimately was to give my characters some privacy. So,
yeah, your internal editor probably was a good thing, because some people can't cut anything. They have trouble no matter what. They want to try their hand at everything. So the fact that you listen to that inner voice and cut it, I mean, I think that's probably a good sign for all of us, knowing that you were thinking of us as you wrote it, and it isn't just a story written for Philip, right?
Oh, I hope so. Yeah.
You brought up a really good and interesting thing that I do agree with, but we ended up being kind of on opposite sides of violence in books and the way that combat is portrayed. I wrote a short story a while back. I took a hand at trying to pin something to paper, and you were gracious enough to give me some feedback on it, and we went back and forth. And I got feedback from multiple people, but one of the conversations we had around it, because you gave me great feedback and good stuff to be actionable. Oh, it was fantastic. But one of the points that we did disagree on about it was I had a scene that was very, and what I would agree with you on is that you said it's a little cliche, because it was the song of the sword dance and things like this,
I remember,
and relating it to a song almost, right? Which the title of the story was The King's Last Verse, and I was trying,
which is, by the way, a great story. There's so much.
It was
there.
Okay.
There's a lot of great things to say about that story.
There were some okay points, it's no Philip Chase, but we'll get there one day, hopefully. But we kind of you brought up the point, that is a little bit cliche, and I do agree with that. And we were talking about Abercrombie, and we're talking about how Abercrombie kind of writes like the dirty, gruff smell of the breath, gasping for air, falling in a face full of mud, claustrophobic almost feeling of combat, and I do love that. But at the same time, as someone who, does martial arts, watches a ton of mixed martial arts, I do find almost an art and a beauty in the violence that is portrayed, at least in a cage or in a boxing ring. Yeah. So it's interesting just how people look at something like that, and something that is obviously really, really relevant to today. Because like you said, it's almost hard to write fantasy without violence, at least epic style fantasy. It's almost like baked into the recipe.
It's a pretty short list of fantasy books that don't have violence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Do you think that's a troubling thing?
It's a very interesting question. I think I would like to be, Angela from Do Unicorns Read had proposed, and I think it'll still happen eventually, a discussion on violence in fantasy. And I think that would be a great topic to talk about, because I think just like, look, just about any other topic really, but violence is something that you can handle in a variety of ways. You can glorify it and make it unrealistic, or you can make it like Abercrombie does, really gritty and just, when you see people that are clawing at each other, and there's just this sense of us being awkward and just ridiculous, and at the same time you're scratching for your life, and there's all these different ways, I guess, of handling it. Same thing with sex, I suppose. Maybe ultimately I decided not to include explicit sex scenes because I didn't want my readers to feel like voyeurs. I didn't want to feel like, but at the same time, when you're looking at violence, you're looking at spectacle. You're looking at, it's the same reaction that maybe people have when they're on the highway and they go by a terrible accident and they're rubbernecking, like, whoa, there's something instinctive, I suppose. But I always think of great series like Malazan and others, and Realm of the Elderlings, and the way that authors like Erickson and Hobb handle violence, to me, is an important thing to think about, because I don't see necessarily glorification. I see them exploring pain and suffering, and that's one of the more important functions of literature, is exploring those things. So I feel that if there is a responsible way to explore violence and to portray it, and a lot of that involves looking at the consequences.
Yes.
Look at the consequence, look at the causes, and look at the consequences. And you'll see that a lot of times you don't have, with these writers don't tend to have long battle scenes that go on for hundreds of pages. They'll have a lot of buildup. And then the battle happens and it's relatively short, and then there's the consequences. And I feel like all of those are at least equally important. So yeah. Everybody's comments are great here. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's some gems here. Actually, I'll read some of them. So Susanna says, violence is so prominent because it characterizes and surrounds the evil characters or forces in fantasy novels. And Key says, I prefer the way Robert E. Howard wrote violence. Conan just cleaves guys' head in two and moves on. No fancy descriptions, like how a lot of ancient epics depicted violence. And Katie, I really like this one, says, I think violence in fantasy is a reflection of how violent life can be for a lot of people, even though most of us experience more emotional violence than anything anymore. Yeah, a lot of really good stuff. And Brian is bringing up the fact that Cormac McCarthy believes that life is violence and any great story has it. And that is for sure one of the things that McCarthy explores almost every single book, is that violence seems to be intertwined into the DNA of man. And that we end up using things around us for war that have no interest in being involved in it. For instance, like horses. I'm reading All the Pretty Horses, and he has this wonderfully philosophical, written page where he talks about how like a soul of a horse is the same as a soul of a man, and it like kind of has become infatuated with running into war with the man on its back, and really, really interesting stuff. But what was your you read some R. Scott Baker finally, which I was really excited about, and
I got to talk to you about.
It was a blast. I mean, I knew that you would bring a really good perspective to that and have a lot to say, and I enjoyed all your videos on that very much. And I was kind of curious, what did you think about the almost Homer-esque way that he did his battles, where he went to a bird's eye? He actually went away from the super intimate character POVs. What did you make of that?
I thought it was effective. I think Baker is just a very immensely talented writer. I'm not sure if the darkness came swirling down line was maybe used a few too many times, and I get the Homeric reference and all that
for sure,
but I do think that Baker gives you a sense of the visceral and horrible nature of violence. And even though he does sometimes zoom out, and there's a tendency for it to be very chronicle-like when he describes those battle scenes that way, which I get what he was doing that very deliberately, because it is a holy war, and he's imitating the way the historians and chroniclers would describe the First Crusade, so that's he's I don't know. I mean, I actually think that just in terms of describing battle scenes, there are a couple authors who for me stick out. One is Abercrombie, we mentioned already, because Abercrombie for me, I personally prefer the more ground level kind of going from character to character to sort of reproduce the quickness of the action and the chaos and all of that. So I prefer, I think there are moments when the zooming out, the bird's eye view is appropriate and interesting to give the reader a sense of the bigger picture, what's going on. But I prefer myself that more on the ground view that gives you a sense of just how terrifying it is. Because you don't feel the terror when you're up there with the birds, right? You don't feel the pain and the suffering, the blood and the guts and everything else. When you're up there, it just seems like almost like a video game or something, Look
at these ants moving around in the dirt.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is another for me, that's another interesting way of looking about this, when you kind of zoom out, right? And like, what are they fighting over down there? My God, that's a lot of bodies. It almost brings an absurdity to it in itself. Whereas down with the little people in the mud in that claustrophobic setting, it's like there's a sense of like animalistic behavior and almost like shame. Like you're almost showing a piece of yourself that you would never show. Because like, as much as love is a very private and intimate thing, whenever you share those kinds of words of affirmation and love, being super angry at someone and not being able to withhold that is also a very like intimate feeling as well. I don't know if anyone here's ever been in a fight, but usually if you get into a fight that is based around a conflict and you're very angry, I think the first thing most sane people feel after they come out of the altercation is shame.
Yeah. Oh, why did I lose it like that?
Yeah. And you realize that people just saw you act like a rabid dog. And you're like, that's not me. But it is. Kinda, right?
But it is. Yeah. No, there's that. Look, we all have that primal part of our brains, right? We all have. Yeah. You have your prefrontal cortex, which is, it's supposed to guide you and keep you from making rash decisions. But you also have that amygdala in there, which sometimes just says, nope, I'm taking over. And then, and then you're a little bit later, your prefrontal cortex is, what did I just do? And this is what makes us so fascinating. This is why literature exists, man, because we have these conflicting parts of our brains. And that's really 90% of the fascination with human beings. It's like Faulkner said, and George R. R. Martin is always cited for this quote, but there's nothing worth writing about but the human heart and conflict with itself. And it's really the human brain, because we have these different parts, right?
Yeah, and even beyond that, like just cognitive dissonance is fascinating to observe, whether it be in our everyday lives, in ourselves, in our loved ones, or in literature as well. Vaughn, I love this point he made here. He said both sex and violence provide opportunities to push the exploration of human reaction and turning points. It's what good fiction does best.
Beautifully said. Yeah.
Very well said. Yes. Yeah. And I also think that a really good use of violence is consequences for one's actions, and not saying that the violence is necessary, but like everyone has a different point where they can kind of cross the line. And I think stories that inspect like that decision to cross the line based on the individual character are some of my favorite stories. And if I were to write something, that is probably what I would go towards, I think, is like the question to the reader would be, when is it appropriate to cross that line? Which everyone would have a different opinion of that. It kind of reminds me whenever, and this isn't really spoilers, but talking about someone that's as despicable as Bidethal in Malazan, Erickson said, I found him irredeemable. So even like Erickson had found a line.
but I think it's worth asking.
It is.
And you and I talked about this without spoilers here, because this is not a Malazan discussion, but one of our very first discussions was on House of Chains, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we talked about whether certain characters are redeemable or not. And I think Erickson generally does. And this is something that I think most great writers do. They don't answer the questions. They pose the questions and they make you think about the questions. But resisting that urge to give the reader the answer, right, I think is what most skillful writers seem to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I've also found that the people in my life that I consider to be brilliant usually don't have answers. And you know, in today's climate, a lot of times being a fence sitter is considered like almost shameful, instead of digging in deeper on your shirt, you know, being so certain about something. So I think that a lot of the best thinkers are people who don't have those answers, but have the right questions to ask. And then you take that home with you and you ask it of yourself and then find out new things about you. And that is certainly something I got from Malazan. I got that from Prince of Nothing. I got that from Blood Meridian.
And certainty. Certainty is a big theme in there, and the consequences of certainty.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're certain you're right, if you're certain that you're righteous and that you have the truth, then you may well believe that those people over there who are not the same as you deserve to die. And not only that, but that God wants you to go and kill them, right?
Yes.
I mean, that kind of certainty is what I think Baker is trying to explore. And he seems I think it's very certain that Baker doesn't like certainty, right?
Yes.
And
he even shows how tightly coupled belief and doubt are in that series, because I think that series definitely gets pushed off as like almost nihilist. I mean, we had you know, whenever Raph was on, and we kind of went back and forth a lot about like whether or not he was only representing one side of the argument. But it is my belief that in that series that he takes off the oven mitts and really does deal with both doubt and belief, which is something that I have found to be the case in a lot of the works that I enjoy the most. I'm reading through the Lycanius trilogy right now. I'm in book 2. I'll probably finish it this weekend, and it's sensational fantasy. And I'll say this when I review the trilogy, but it's sensational fantasy for better or for worse. Like, has some of the best pieces of what you would want from sensational fantasy, and also some of the worst parts of sensational fantasy.
Okay.
And I feel like this is a series that had an opportunity to really explore some interesting concepts and themes when it came to like xenophobia and belief and doubt. And unfortunately, it did feel like James Islington used oven mitts with it. Now, the reason why I'm still okay with that is because this was not what he set out to do when he wrote this series. I don't think that he was posing grandiose questions or anything. I don't think he wanted to get a lot of mileage out of it. Just happens to be pieces of the story. And where it lacks in those elements, it has in spades with world building and twists and turns and plotting and everything else. So it's interesting. I say some of my favorites, you know, explore these things very in an unflinching manner.
Yeah.
But I can still enjoy series that put on the oven mitts and kind of shuffle me along. Like I still enjoy those times, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there's space in our heads for all sorts of stories. Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. Joanna says it got uglier with the zooming out.
Fight or flight is something I would like to see more of in fantasy, because I feel like almost all the time people fight, or whenever a character is cowardly, it's always in like obvious. For instance, in Mark Lawrence's first book in the Red Queen's War, Prince of Fools.
So Prince of Fools is the first one in Red Queen's War. Yeah.
So the main character is a coward. I mean, he's an absolute coward, and you know,
he says he is. Yeah.
He says he is, right? And I'm sure there's growth over time, but whenever he does cowardly things, it's not much of a surprise. But I've always wanted to see more of series that kind of show a cowardly side of someone who thought they were going to do very well in battle. I always like that trope, or people who have been good in battle. I would think of the Hound in Game of Thrones during Battle of Blackwater and the Clash of Kings. Actually, the Hound, and I won't say what happened for the 2 people in the world who haven't read that book yet. But the Hound has a moment of cowardice, who you would never expect to have a moment like that. So I think fight is explored a lot in epic fantasy, but flight, not so much.
Well, there's a book I just read, funny enough, that treats that theme pretty head on, and it's Legend by David Gemmell.
Ah, that is true. So I've tried to read Gemmell twice.
Uh-huh.
And Legend is the book. Both times I got like almost all the way through it, like 60% of the way through it. And both times I didn't like say I'm done. It was just like I kind of forgot about it every time.
Oh, no.
I know, and that's terrible. And a bunch of, I know Stephen Arian, author, huge fan of Gemmell. If he hears that, I'm toast. He'll be very angry with me. I need to get back on that horse because I love the old tired, weathered warrior going for one last. I mean, that's what my short story is about. Like that's like my favorite trope in the world.
Yes, you should. Yeah, you should be at least, I think, a Legend fan to some
You would
degree.
think, right?
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? Why not?
And there's also depth to that book, which surprised me, and the humor did too. But the depth was really wonderful. And famously, this is not a spoiler to tell people, David Gemmell thought he was dying when he wrote this book. He had a misdiagnosis of terminal cancer, and years later he did die of it, I think. But that was many, many books later. So there, as you can imagine, is a very explicit concern with the theme of mortality. And along with it is, oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Along with those themes of mortality, you get this idea of courage and cowardice and how those things are so intertwined, because what is courage after all? And I love, I just recently talked with Tori and Matt from Matt on Books on Matt's channel about Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, which is a Vietnam War. Basically, it's not a memoir, it's not an autobiography, but it's based on Tim O'Brien's actual experiences in Vietnam. And one of the biggest insights in the title story, The Things They Carried, to me has always been the idea that there are 2 great fears that these soldiers carried around all the time. One is the fear of dying, obviously, because you're getting shot at, you're in combat, and your friends are, getting wounded and dying all around you. But there's even one more fear that's greater, and that is the fear of shame. And that is what keeps them there. The fear of shame, the fear of cowardice, which is what barely restrains them. So it's just that tension is there all the time. So what is courage? Courage is when you're afraid of shame more than you're afraid of dying.
Wow. Which is a wild thing to think about from like an evolutionary perspective, because we have evolved to survive. I mean, we still have things we do today that are from surviving, thousands of years ago, maybe millions of years ago, even. And somewhere along in the chain of command, we decided that shame was worse. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a society thing? Like, I don't know.
How did that sink in? I mean, if you read books like Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene and that sort of thing, the idea that we are survival machines for our genes. I mean, we should be inherently self-interested and preserve our skins at whatever cost. But the fact of the matter is, and Dawkins acknowledges this too, compassion exists. Fear of shame exists, and where do these things come from? And again, here we go back to human beings being this receptacle of conflict, because yes, we do want to live. We're scared of dying. But we also believe in things like courage and compassion. And these beliefs make us do things that don't make sense from an evolutionary, at least from the individual's survival perspective, right?
Yeah, and it's almost to when we talk about some of the most standout characters that we read in books that we love, a lot of them, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a good amount of them that are so opposite of that. That are maybe cold or even slightly sociopathic, that we cannot just help but to find them to be fascinating. Like the ends justify the means 100% of the way. I mean, Kellis is what I'm thinking of, or maybe even someone like Carson Orlong or Conan. And it's almost fascinating to watch that, because I think that there's like a piece of us to understand that that is like possible, and that that is like a piece of being human. But without the other side to balance it out, it becomes a spectacle almost, and almost a case study of like what it would look like if someone only went down that road of thinking of survival.
Yep. Yep. And that's what literature is for. And that's why we have violence. One of the reasons why we have violence in literature is because I think we have a need to explore these things. So a character like what you were just describing is somebody who's probably going to perpetrate some serious violence. And if that somebody has his hands on a whole lot of power, it's going to be violence on a large scale. So.
Yeah, man. I just finished up reading A Remembrance of Earth's Past, which is the 3-body problem trilogy. And it kind of like, I don't know, it almost inspects the embarrassment that is like humanity in a way. Cause like, even when things are going in an absolute terrible direction and we're like somewhat doomed, like we still find a reason to do terrible things to one another and violence. And it's like, it really is just kind of baked in. And obviously it's a work of fiction, but man, did it feel true to me. Like, I was like, I could see this happening in real time. Like this, if I ever lived through this awful thing, all of these things would probably happen. It felt very realistic.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's what fiction is. It's a lot of lies to tell some big truths.
Damn. Right? Oh, I like that. Where'd you get that?
Oh, there have been various versions of that.
Okay. I like it. I thought maybe it was John Gardner. I wasn't sure.
I mean, I'll have to trace that, and I probably mangled it too. But it's been said many times. Yeah, that fiction is essentially we string together a bunch of little lies in order to convey important truths, and so we have to. Yes, I love that. Yeah, heart. Yeah.
Now, this is a bit of a controversial opinion from Mitch here in the chat, and I kind of want to get your take on this.
All right.
The Two Towers would have been better if Aragorn pooped his pants at Helm's Deep.
Well, I mean, it's a very funny comment, but I think that Mitch has actually made an interesting point that we can talk about. Because
let's do it.
All right, this is a difference between Tolkien's violence and, say, Abercrombie's violence. Abercrombie's characters would poop their pants. Absolutely. Right? I mean, that's a fair, along with all the squelching and everything else, there'd be some serious squelching after they poop their pants too, I'm sure. But that's how it is. I mean, that happens. Apparently, I wouldn't know because I've never been in combat. But I'm told that these things happen. You hear about, armor and knights having to clean out their armor after a battle. And
I have heard this. Yes.
Yeah. So Tolkien's violence tends to be more stylized, and this is traditional fantasy. And yes, I mean, you can look at the Silmarillion where there's a lot of death and there's a lot of just tough, awful stuff. But even there, I think most of the time, and Tolkien is, by the way, of course, we all know he was in World War I and he saw real violence. He knew very well what it looked like, what it felt like. He knew what fear was. He knew what seeing your friends die was like. So he knew that stuff. But he chose to write in a way that's a little more stylized or distant, I guess, in a sense that, he doesn't give us the visceral descriptions that say an Abercrombie would. And that's what Tolkien did, and that was probably more in line with the way literature was that he grew up with, certainly. And so, that was what he did. But the effect there is, I think we can feel that there's some glorification to that, oh, look, we killed the hordes of orcs and we all celebrate, yay, and there's no consideration for all the lives lost. Yes, I suppose there are moments of mourning for the good people who die in the wars and that sort of thing, but there's a kind of a lack of moral complexity in that, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
Whereas if you had an Aragorn who was... Now, Aragorn I love, don't get me wrong. I'm the biggest Tolkien fan in the whole wide world. So don't get me wrong here, but Aragorn is not a three-dimensional character. He is an archetype, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
The noble, virtuous, heroic figure who, you know, is destined to be a king. You know, we know that figure every time we see it. Most of the characters in Lord of the Rings, except for the hobbits to me are the most human-like. But the epic characters like Aragorn are very much taken out of myth, you know. So that's obviously, you're not going to have an Aragorn pooping his pants at Helm's Deep, because, you know, that wouldn't fit with the myth. That would be a very much more human.
Wait, and maybe he did, and we'll never know, because that is not what you pass on down the line.
That's right. That's right. What happens at Helm's Deep stays at Helm's Deep.
I was just watching Gregory Sadler, Dr. Gregory Sadler here on YouTube. He's been going over a lot of Tolkien's essays on fantasy, and the one he posted today was talking about escapism. And Tolkien was extremely pro-escapism. And I have a feeling that possibly one of the reasons maybe why he wrote in the way that he did and from that distance is to make it a little bit easier to escape, because at the time that he wrote this, the world was in mourning of world wars, and was very likely like they were just going to keep happening. There's a lot of turmoil.
Great point. It's a great point.
Yeah, I wonder if that, you know, obviously went into the decision to write the way that he did.
I absolutely think you've just you hit the nail on the head there, Jimmy. I think you made a great point, in that the world had seen enough violence, and maybe we need to escape. And there's a wonderful line that Tolkien has in his essay on fairy stories, where he takes on the accusation that fairy stories and fantasy is all escapism, and like it's a negative thing. And he poses the question: escape from what, though? Right?
Yes, real life, and he capitalizes the R and the L.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you're right. I mean, he had a purpose, and he knew what he was doing very well. It's not that he doesn't know what real violence was like, because that man lived through some pretty scary stuff. It was a deliberate choice on his part, and it was part of the escapism. It was I think Tolkien wanted to tell a story that was ultimately going to be ennobling and beautiful.
Yes.
And having your king, you know, poop his pants is not maybe not ennobling and beautiful. I don't know.
Colin asks, all right, Philip, how many characters poop their pants in your new book?
You're gonna have to count.
Oh man.
I will say there is some pants pooping. Yeah,
I'm pretty excited. That'll be my favorite part of the book when I eventually review it. By the way, Philip, this book better be good, because like, are you really gonna make me be the bad guy and be the one to be like, guys?
Well, I think in the chat, Evie asked, "Are you still gonna be my friend if I give your book 1 star?" And yes, of course I am. Yes, I don't expect all my friends on BookTube to be. And there's Alan giving me a star already.
I could just hear freaking Philip. Thinks he's so smart.
Wait, I'm not talking to Alan anymore because I hit 20K, right?
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, and I'm good because I hit 11, so I hit the over 10 threshold.
Right.
Alan's trying, guys. He's doing his best.
So, Alan, you missed our whole pants pooping conversation. But
yeah, you really missed a crappy conversation, man.
Oh, cool. Yeah, he's out on a date. Do you know how nice this is of him to check in? I mean, he must love us or something.
He definitely does. He absolutely does. So yeah, Tolkien definitely wanted to provide, I think, some relief from what was happening in the world. It's a very optimistic story. Have you ever read Epic Pooh and Michael Moorcock's kind of critique, I would say, of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien?
I want to do a video on that at some point. I actually have not read it yet, but okay. I would like to do, because I have this series of videos that I do on various essays written about fantasy, and I've done quite a few of them now, and that is on my list, definitely on my list of essays to take on. I take it you've read it, though.
Yeah, I have. And I actually, really cool insight from interviewing Tad Williams here on Chatting with Nuts a couple weeks back.
Oh, that was so great. Yeah.
It was terrific, man. He was such a good dude to talk to. And it felt like just me and you talking, you know. He's just, he's so open and optimistic. That was one thing, to go on a little bit of a side tangent here. I always ask people, I said, is there anything concerning you with the way things are going in publishing and fantasy in specific, and everyone usually has an answer for that. And that's, I'm asking the question. I'm curious.
Yeah.
And Tad was the first person to say, nope, nothing at all. I am pumped for the future of the genre. I am pumped for the future of literature. And it wasn't a canned like HR answer. He genuinely has so much faith in the new talent that's coming up. And he sees so many things that have not been represented before. It's just a crazy perspective switch from, we hear it all the time, and maybe we add to it a little bit, right? Like we say, the new stuff's all fast paced and this and that, but he loves the new voices that are coming out and the way that things are being explored. And I just think that that's really important coming from someone like Tad, who had such a big hand in getting us to where we had, Robin Hobb, George R. Martin, and maybe not like fully responsible, but definitely a bridge to make those things a lot more commercially viable. So I thought that was really amazing. But, he was very inspired by Tolkien, clearly, with Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, but he was also inspired by Michael Moorcock. And I asked him about it. I said, like, how did you feel about it? And he said that he felt like Moorcock it was more about classism and how that's a different thing in Europe and specifically in the UK compared to in America when we hear that. And it's not as big of a divide, or maybe it's a different type of divide, I should say. And I'm butchering this, so, I'm paraphrasing and whatnot. But I thought it was just really interesting to hear from someone who has kind of stock in both people, and him kind of explaining the back and forth and maybe some of the things Moorcock got wrong or got right. And at the very least, it's a fascinating it's worth your time, and I think you'll do a great job of breaking it down. I do think that Moorcock missed a lot of the environmentalism that Tolkien was going for, and the green being good. That's something that Christopher Rocchio talked a lot about whenever he was on. And so I think there's some misses in there. And the funniest thing is, I heard after the fact that Moorcock may have not actually read Lord of the Rings, that he skimmed it.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know if that's true, but if it is, it's actually really funny. Like, that'd be such a jerk move.
I think that's actually unethical to
it is.
Pack a book that you haven't even
I can't
read.
wait to do it to your book. It's going to be so fun.
1 star. I haven't even read it. 1 star.
Oh God.
Yeah, no, your interview with Tad Williams was fantastic. He has so much positive energy, and I love his optimism. I agree with him, actually, about the future of the genre being very bright. And I think that I also agree with you about his, I think we owe him, for what he's done for the genre. I've only read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn myself so far, but I would definitely love to read more of his work. I need to reread that, really, because it's been a long time since I read that. But it's still, there are certain scenes that are just absolutely branded in here from that, and I guess it's a trilogy. I'll call it a trilogy. Certain scenes that I'll talk to you about when we're not on camera that are just like seared in here that almost gave me nightmares when I was reading it. But he's done such an effective job with that, and there's beauty in there too. I can see where he would be kind of in between, and that's kind of where I've tried to land myself.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I in my writing, I try to include beauty and hope, but I also feel like I'm not glorifying violence, and I hope I'm not. I tried not to glorify violence, to show that it's real, that pain and suffering are a result, and to deal with the consequences of violence and the causes, because that's really what I'm looking at. It's a holy war, and I'm interested in what brings people to the point of certainty where they feel that they're justified in harming others, right?
Yeah. And this is the reason why, I mean, outside of it just being your book, that is something I'll eat up any day of the week. Like, that is something that I think is worth inspecting. And it's a question that's been asked many times over history and has, come to a head. So I'm very excited to see what you do with it. David Sloan is worded this very, very nicely, but he says, Philip, as explored in Wild's preface to Dorian Gray, do you think authors, yourself included, are obligated to endow their art with moral propositions?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that preface to Dorian Gray. I've even taught it before. It's a great question. Are we obligated to endow art with moral propositions? And this was something that was debated heatedly in the late 19th, early 20th century, where you had certain critics who believed that there was a responsibility from art, including, writing and that sort of thing, to have moral lessons embedded in it. And then others who responded, no, there is absolutely no obligation whatsoever. Artists are there to just explore and go where they go. And it could be purely aesthetic or whatever. It doesn't have to have a moral lesson embedded in it. And it's a bit, I think I'm gonna evade answering directly, but I feel that, like I said earlier, that great writers like Stephen Erickson and Robin Hobb and others that I admire deeply are very good at posing the questions, but not heavy-handedly given the answers. They don't make you say, oh yes, this is the way it is. Stephen Erickson never says be compassionate, right? In the Malazan series, he doesn't say that. What he does is he explores compassion. He shows you compassion and many facets of it and allows you to experience compassion. So those are two different things, right? So I guess my answer, David, is that great literature can explore moral propositions, but I think the instinct to avoid telling your reader this is the way it is probably a good one. So.
Yeah, Harold Bloom, who's a famous critic, maybe of all time in the Western side of things, believed that it's all about aesthetics, which is why he loves Ulysses, right? Like he thinks that's like peak literature, right? And I think there's also a lot of thematic value in those kind of works as well, but he was very much an aesthetics first person. So I think this is a conversation that's still going on today and still argued about, and people agreeing what makes great literature. And maybe that conversation in itself is why we're still looking. That's why we continue to read new things, to try to find something else to use an example to support either side of that argument.
Yeah, if Jimmy, I ever say to you, well, I got it all figured out, I don't need to read any more books, I know everything now, and I know all the answers, please hit me on the head.
I will. I absolutely will. I guess it is possible that you could read a genre so deeply and so thoroughly that you see almost everything, right? Like you could read almost all fantasy books if you had an unlimited amount of time.
Ooh, I don't know. It depends on how you define fantasy, I suppose.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, we can extend it back a bit if we want to make it extra challenging.
That is true.
Like as in all the way back to Gilgamesh, So
yeah, the original Chad.
Yes, the original Chad.
Kaladin Kabata, I think, says will we be able to get our hands on some signed copies of your book, Philip? And other people were actually asking earlier. I meant to put it in on the screen, but they're also asking about pre-orders.
Okay, yeah. So this stuff I'm learning about. So I'll tackle the pre-order.
What, you never heard of a pre-order until this year?
I mean, it's sort of complicated. I didn't realize how complicated it is. So when you're a self-published author publishing through KDP, which is Amazon's publishing wing, you can offer a pre-order on ebooks. However, you cannot. There is no option to offer a pre-order on the paperback or the physical copy. You can do that apparently if you're published with a traditional publisher. But what I'm reading is you cannot, and please, somebody in the chat knows better than this. This is what I'm reading. You cannot do a pre-order on the paperback. So March 21st is my release date, and that's when you'll be able to get the paperback. I hope to be able to offer the ebook on pre-order, though, at least maybe a couple weeks before March 21st. So people, if they want to pre-order, can. But I'm getting all kinds of advice from really wonderful people, by the way, who the self-publishing community is much like the booktube community, and there's a lot of overlap, of course.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But there are a lot of very kind people out there who are helping me out without, any expectation of reciprocation or anything. They're just being nice. And some of them have told me, actually, for the first book, you don't want to make a pre-order available very long before the release date. And there are lots of reasons for that. Part of it, and this sounds very mercenary, but Amazon apparently will not count. So if people pre-order the book, the moment they pre-order, that's when it counts for Amazon as a sale. It doesn't, in other words, it doesn't accumulate. And then on opening day, suddenly I have, boom, a whole bunch of sales. They count the pre-order when it comes in. So yeah, if you string it out too early beforehand, then you're actually kind of shooting yourself in the foot, apparently, is what I've been told. So you don't want to make your pre-order too far ahead for your first book. You don't want to make it too far ahead of the release date. So that's the wisdom I'm being told by people who know. So that's probably what I'll do. My plan right now, then, because there are no pre-orders on KDP for the paperback. So that's just how it is. I can't do anything about that, but I'll try to make it available for pre-order a couple weeks before March 21st for the ebook, at least. Yeah.
Cool. And just there's some people asking, is it going to be sold anywhere other than Amazon, or is it just Amazon?
Yes.
For now?
So here's the other wisdom. If there are any people out there who are thinking of self-publishing, this is something I've learned, again, from very kind individuals. So Amazon is great. The platform they have set up there at KDP is really user-friendly, and it's a very straightforward process doing it through Amazon. But not everybody will buy from Amazon. Famously, libraries don't, and a lot of small bookstores, because obviously they're not the biggest fans of Amazon. So for those folks, I'm going to be publishing the paperback only, because Amazon gets exclusivity on the ebook. So that's a different proposition. So ebook will only be available from Amazon, but the paperback I will be also publishing through Ingram Spark, which is the other big self-publishing venue. And it's that's where the libraries or whatever and small bookstores, whatever, if they want, they can order from Ingram Spark. So yeah, it's essentially going to be the same thing. I'm told the Ingram Spark covers tend to be a little bit more vivid. So I don't know if that makes a difference to anybody or not. Yeah, so that's the route I'm going. And as for signed copies, I have not figured out how that works yet. But
you take a pen and you sign it.
Is that how it works?
It's not hard.
But how do I get it to people? How do I?
Well, there has been rumors that there's this thing called a post office, and
I have to mail them all to people.
I think what you would do is you would probably have to have somewhere else to say, hey, there are 100 signed copies for sale on this site, and you can do that. Like,
it would have to be through a bookstore or something like that.
Yeah, I would assume so, or your own website or something like that. Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, so I'll figure that out. Signed copies, and of course, you know, I'm happy to sign copies if anyone visits me here.
Are you going to do anything in your local bookstores? You going to like go set up a table somewhere? And
I haven't planned anything like that yet. Oh yeah, book plates. Yeah, Melissa's suggestion there is good. So
nice.
Those would be cheaper to mail than whole books. So yeah, but yeah, I'll figure all that out, and hopefully that I will. Oh, okay. So Colin is confirming that I'm actually correct about something. Yes. Okay. That the Ingram Spark covers are a bit more vivid. Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing, another question I wanted to ask you about was your international distribution. Like, are people going to be able to get this everywhere?
Pretty much. I mean, so wherever Amazon is, you can get the book. And wherever Amazon isn't, you might be able to get it via Ingram Spark. That's the idea. Now, Amazon does have a thing called expanded distribution. Initially, I was going to do that, but apparently that doesn't work as well in reality as it does in theory. Again, because a lot of places don't like to buy outside of Amazon, don't like to buy from Amazon. So I've been told that the best route to go these days, right now, is to publish with Amazon, yes, but also publish in, and this is very much above board. This is what I think probably a majority of self-published authors do. is to publish also with Ingram Spark for the paperback. And that way it's available to folks who don't have access to Amazon or don't want to go through Amazon. So
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot. This is a huge learning.
It's a big operation. You know, there's a reason why there's companies that do this kind of thing and take care of a lot of the logistics for you. I also saw that Master Sal says that maybe a Patreon perk of a signed book like that, actually, because Patreon does have shipping stuff. So that could be a good way for you to also do that.
Yeah, see, I don't even have a Patreon.
Well, you can set it up for it to be like a one-time thing, one-time pledge.
Oh, okay.
Maybe, hey, I don't know, maybe Kickstarter, who knows?
Yeah, I will figure it out. If folks want signed copies, I would like to make that happen.
Yeah.
I would like to do as much as I can for the readers. So that's why I'm publishing all 3 books this year, because I figure that's preferable for a lot of people, not to have to wait a year for book 2 and then another year for book 3 and that sort of thing. So
do you feel a sense of pressure for what comes next
after the trilogy, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, it just so happens I've written a standalone sequel. So
you got him in the chamber ready to go.
Yeah, ready to go. Actually, I do need to edit that. And I need to talk to my developmental editor about taking a peek at it too. So hopefully AP will be able to do that as well. And but I feel very good about that story. I have a title for it. It's called While Darkness Gathers. And it takes place about a generation after the trilogy. So, yeah.
Nice. So do you think this is a world that you will continue to write in even after the standalone, or is there another thing that you've had like kind of itching in the back of your brain?
I think this is a world, I spent a lot of time making this world, so I would like to stay in it for a while, I think. But I don't have anything written beyond these 4, the trilogy and the standalone sequel. But I can imagine wanting to visit these characters again in this standalone sequel. So I think that probably that's what I'll end up doing.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, I'm always down for big universe type deal. Well, not universe, maybe big world type things, and really going for it on the epic scale. And getting lost in the world seems fun. And I don't feel like there's I mean, there's a lot of series out there, but there's not a lot of like multiple series worlds. You know, I think people have gotten away from that a bit, and then they kind of go to the next idea. And it's always interesting because I feel like with most people, you can kind of see remnants of their other series. Like even with Tad, I would say that Shadow March Book 1 has some things in common with Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think that most authors, maybe all, but I'm not going to be, I'll say most, have certain beats, they have certain themes, they have certain mannerisms and tics that you get to recognize much. I've compared it before to a composer. Like if I hear Vivaldi on the radio and I haven't even heard that piece before, I still know, oh, that's Vivaldi, right?
Yeah, it's like Zakk Wylde playing the guitar. Like I know when it's Zakk Wylde's playing the guitar. It's just like he has certain things he does. He likes the whammy bar. He does all kinds of things that they become signatures almost of a style.
Yeah, I think so. And it's just part of your personality, part of as a writer, all the books that, have entered your psyche, they're going to leak out of you, in one way or another. And so after so many, words, you're going to repeat certain things. You know how it is. Like every author has certain things they repeat a lot. And if you know an author well, their favorite stock phrases and stuff like that. I remember reading A Song of Ice and Fire and thinking, I think I've heard that line about nipples on a breastplate before.
That is very true. Yes.
Yeah, but that's how it is. That's how it is.
Evie has a question for us. Jimmy and Philip, what are you all reading now? I finished up Return of the King today as a reread for the millionth time. Still my favorite of the trilogy, or the one book, if you will. And I am reading An Echo of what is the I always mess up the book 2 in the Lycanius trilogy, and I'm also reading All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. What about you, Philip? What are you reading right now?
Wow. Okay. Well, I actually it's rare for me to be reading two things at once, but because of the weight of the first bind up of the Vagabond series, it's this big chunky thing. I've just finished that. Just reading the first, I guess, 3 volumes or whatever, bound up into one book.
Yeah, like an omnibus. Yeah,
book 1 of Vagabond. So I just finished that, and I'm reading also at the same time because I can carry it when I had to go somewhere, like when I have to bring my daughter somewhere and I sit there, I have nothing to do, I bring a book. I've been reading Dresden Files, book 6, Blood Rights. So that is on my ongoing, very slow so far Dresden read. I've been using the Dresden books as palate cleansers so far. But I know it gets to a point where it's no longer palate cleanser material, and you have to read one after another. So yeah, that's nice. Those are the 2 books I've been reading, and when I finish, I should finish that really soon. I'll be reading the 2nd book of the Tawny Man trilogy. So nice. I forget what is it? Golden Fool? Is that book 2 of the Tawny Man? Golden Fool?
Yes, book 2 of Tawny Man is Golden Fool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Very nice. We over here at the Fantasy Network read Blood Rights, and unfortunately that has kind of put a soft pause on Dresden for me for right now. It was kind of going up, and then Blood Rights kind of teetered out. I treat them also like palate cleansers. My goal is to try to read 2 of them this year if I can. And throw them in, unless if I get the itch, because there is something about Dresden that does provide, like, only Dresden scratches that itch, right?
They're fun. They've always been fun for me, and I was warned by many Dresden Files fans who, by the way, have not been wrong yet. They've been right about every step of this reading journey so far. So a lot of them warned me, look, okay, so the series kind of takes a little bit of a dive with Blood Rights, and I think particularly because they heard some of the things that I have been bothered by earlier in the series, and they're like, well, you're probably not going to like Blood Rights too much. So I came in it with very low expectations, and it's actually not as bad as I thought it would be. It's definitely not. I liked book 5 better. The 5th book was Summer Night. Is that book 5?
That was book 4. Death Mask.
What's 5? Oh yeah, Death Mask.
Death Mask was pretty good.
So yes, Summer Night I loved, and then I thought Death Mask was even better. And so this is kind of a bit of a dip, I think. But I'm expecting now. What the fans tell me is book 7 in Dresden Files is really good. So that's where the steep climb starts. Yeah, the upswing. So I'm excited for that. Yeah.
Nice. Some exponential returns on the time invested. Yeah, Dresden fans seem to be very in tune with the negatives of the series, and they seem to be very forthright. And I mean, there's a couple, that maybe we don't want to admit any of them, but I will say that they have been very transparent and honest when it comes to faults of the series, which is actually, I think, a really good thing for a fandom. Because every fandom's rabid to a certain extent.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I have to say, I know that's true. There are certain elements, and it depends on how you interact with them. I've been made clear my issues with certain series, and Dresden is no exception. And honestly, the fans have been really helpful. They've been very, how do I say this? Very eager to point out the pluses and explain why, certain elements, maybe this doesn't work for you, but he gets better at this later and that sort of thing. I found them to be very helpful, actually. So I haven't encountered a single Dresden fan so far that has said, how dare you say that, anything like that. They've all been actually really kind and I think pretty understanding. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. Butcher's doing something right over there. I think he lives in Colorado, over there in Colorado. Ali has a great question. Said, how do you choose your titles, Philip? Meaning titles for your books? Because I do like your titles. They're familiar, but yet not as cliche as some that we see that come out.
That's a great question. I don't have an actual answer to it. Other than I realized fairly early when I was writing the first book that this was a book about a holy war, and that as such, religion was going to be central. The Way is the name of a religion, and Idan is the name of a god. So the Way of Idan, that's where that comes from. And so Prophet, the second book is called The Prophet of Idan. And then the third book is called Return to Idan. And I realized, oh, it's the Idan trilogy, right? That just sort of fell into place. And I feel like those words are the way, prophet, return. There's a certain religious resonance to those, a spiritual resonance, if you will. And so I thought that they would be fitting, that they somehow would convey a bit of what the trilogy is about. And there's, along with religion, and you hear this reflected, I think, in the title of the sequel, While Darkness Gathers, very much a concern with mortality. And you and I have talked about that before, Jimmy, how that's a central theme of my trilogy, is how we deal with mortality. And so that's probably, I guess, where that came from. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Sometimes it's time to name something, and you pick a name and you say, that sounds pretty good. And then you move on.
Yeah. It actually took me a while to figure out the title of the first book. It was a conversation with a friend that I was having at the time, way back when. And he said, this religion thing seems to be pretty central. Why don't you call it, after the religion? I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So, yeah.
Nice. Very nice. David Sloan has another question for you. He said, would you ever be interested in a full-time writing career, finances permitting?
Yes.
I think that's the plan, right?
I mean, I don't know if I can say it's the plan, because it would entail a lot of things going really well. And, I'm not prepared to quit my day job anytime soon. But that's a dream. That's definitely the dream, would be to be able to make a go of it, just writing. And that's not something that most writers can do. Most writers, even those that we might think of as pretty successful, cannot make a living straight up writing. They usually are supported by somebody, or they have a primary job or another job that keeps them afloat. So that's just the way it is. There are very few writers who can just write. Yeah,
I think Mark Lawrence did a video about like how much writers make. Maybe it wasn't Mark Lawrence; it might have been somebody else. But
he did something. Yeah. I think he did. Yeah, you're probably thinking of Mark Lawrence. Yeah.
Yeah, who gave you a ringing endorsement for the book, if I'm correct?
Yes, Mark Lawrence was very, very generous and kind, and I was nervous actually, in a way, for him, because I think he's known for being pretty honest with his feedback. And so I thought, and we joked a little bit. It was kind of funny in our email exchange. The first time he wrote back to me was, after I'd sent him the book, and he got the book, and he wrote back to his email. I was very nervous to open it. And he says, I'm relieved to find that you actually can write, So that was nice. And from there, I sort of relaxed and realized, okay, I think he's going to have something good to say. And unfortunately he did. And I'm very grateful to him, and to John Gwynn, and to Jenny Wirtz, and to Ian Esselmont, all of them who wrote such really, the blurbs are, I can read them again and again.
Man. I mean, it's impressive. I don't know if I've ever seen a debut of any kind, traditionally or self-published, that has this many blurbs from this, high-ranking people and people of importance, I would say. And I know for a fact I've never seen a self-published book with that many endorsements. So that has me very, very optimistic for it.
Yeah. All I can say is I'm extremely grateful to those authors, and to have your heroes. These people are my heroes. I admire each one of them, their work, and to have them say something positive about my writing was just wow.
Yeah.
Just that alone was worth all these years of toil.
Yeah, it's just it's downright amazing, but it is despicable that you would not ask me for a blurb.
Oh, well, there is book 2, so you know.
Well, I'm just saying, Fantasy Network, fantasy as it ought to be written, right on that front cover. I mean, come on, come on, it writes itself, Philip.
I think you might get sued for plagiarism if that was your blurb.
Hey, if that's what I got to do to get George to talk to me, I'm fine with it. I don't think it would be George.
In court, nuts.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be George. I think it'll be his representatives.
Yeah, most likely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're 2 months away from being able to call yourself an author on something that you've worked decades on at this point, and
yeah,
I can't really imagine what you're feeling about that. But where does this rank? Because you've done a lot of stuff in your life. You've done a lot of really cool stuff. I mean, you're a very accomplished person. You have a good work ethic. You got a great head on your shoulders. Obviously, outside of things like getting married and having children. But when it comes to individual things, where does this rank for you? Is this number 1?
Yeah, of course. Getting married, having children.
Of course.
Number 1. Nothing more important than that.
Yikes.
Yeah. My wife's probably watching this. So yes, obviously that's number 1. But other than that, yeah, this is it. Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, I wrote a dissertation, which I'm proud of. It's a book, it's a 300-page book about William Morris and his translations of Icelandic sagas and Beowulf. And, that involved a lot of work. Getting a PhD was a lot of work, but I'd say nothing compares to this. It's just my dream since I was 12 years old was to do this. And so I'm going for it. Yeah, and, I'm a little scared too, honestly, because I think everybody can relate to this. When you do put years of effort into something and you get there, it can be a little bit of a downer, yeah. I remember when I finished my dissertation and I defended it. You have to defend your dissertation in front of a committee and they grill you, and it's a load of fun. So I finished it, and you think, wow, I got my PhD, great, everything, celebrate. I was depressed because this thing that had taken up my life was gone. And I was like, okay, I need to figure out what's next. That seems to be human nature, right?
Yeah, I can relate to that so much in multiple ways with everything that I've done in my past. I've always found in the biggest moments of my life where everyone looks to you for celebration, like this is your moment. In my mind, I'm always somewhere else, and I'm always thinking about how what's next. Like I'm very much about the climb rather than standing at the mountaintop with both hands in the air. And I've almost always felt that the celebration in that moment is performative. Like it's almost like for everyone else. I don't really know how else to express it, but I felt that way whenever I reached a certain goal that I had in independent wrestling, which was to win the heavyweight title at the place that I kind of got inspired to become a wrestler, right? It's probably, in my opinion, is like one of the biggest places that you could wrestle in the independent circuit. Yep. And
wow,
I knew that was always my goal. Like I set out to do that, and I did it. And I just remember that night, just like a sense of melancholy.
Yep.
Like I felt like I was melting. I can't really describe it. And maybe there's something about the chase that is actually what I wanted out of it. Like maybe the purpose that it provided was bigger than the goal itself.
Right. Yeah. Have you ever read Christopher Marlowe's the play Dr. Faustus?
I have not.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you spoilers. It's 400 years old or whatever. So
okay, I think it's fair game.
I think it's fair to spoil it to some degree. And it's the whole premise, really. I'll just tell you what the premise of the play. So Faustus is this genius who masters various realms of knowledge. He's mastered medicine, and he's cured all kinds of diseases, and he's brilliant. He saved thousands of lives, and he got bored with it though ultimately because he realized that everyone's going to die eventually anyway, right? So what's the point of all this? And so he mastered philosophy and he found it to be ultimately empty. He mastered theology and found it to be ultimately all these realms of knowledge he's mastered. He's a genius. They're just ultimately futile. So he turns to magic, dark magic, and he makes a deal with Mephistopheles, a demon. He makes a deal with the devil, essentially.
A critical dragon, right?
A critical dragon. That's right. He made a deal with AP Canavan. Basically, unlimited knowledge for 24 years. I think it's 24 years. And then he goes to hell. Right. And for him, it was worth it because he wanted that. He wanted the next horizon. He wanted that so badly. And so he made this deal. And you would think that when you have unlimited knowledge, you would do something amazing, right? But what does he spend the rest of his years doing? Is basically playing a bunch of dumb jokes, kind of just nothing important. And I feel like it's because we need that thing on the horizon that we just can't quite grasp. We need that next thing, that goal. That's just part of what we are. And if you get it all, it's a bit like I guess this is a stereotype, but a rich kid who's born with everything. And what do rich kids who are born with everything often do? They do stupid things, right? Because they don't have to strive for anything. They don't have to go for something. They don't have these goals in front of them and that sort of thing, right? So that's what Faustus became, essentially. It was just bored because he didn't have anything to strive for anymore. So we just kind of need that, I think, for a sense of purpose. And I don't know, maybe I'll arrive at some point of enlightenment in my life where I don't have to have that, where I'll just be in the now. Yeah. That would be lovely, right? To be in the now and not be hankering after this next thing, that I think is going to be so fulfilling and going to make me complete. And then I get there and I'm like, huh.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest challenge, like post wrestling, actually.
Yep.
And then also that's a different thing, like what I talked about earlier, and then actually not being able to do what you wanted to do anymore, or at least that it's not what you should be doing because it's not good for the people around you or your body and your health or whatever. But I would say that that's something I've actually improved on.
Yeah.
But I would say that it overall does contribute to the struggles that I go through on a daily basis with like depression and stuff. Yeah. Because even though I am much more in the moment now and I'm not concerned about the ends, it is undoubtedly subconsciously still there. Like it has to be, because I remember what fully motivated going for the gold Jimmy Nuts was. And I am not that person anymore.
Yeah,
I'm okay if only 2 of the 6 abs are out. You know what I mean? Like it's okay to eat some ice cream here and there.
Abs? What are abs?
Yeah, I'm slowly. They're like the hobbits sailing at the end, and so see ya, they're gone.
There was a time when I didn't even have to work at having abs, and now it's just that's life.
It's unfair, is what it is.
Yeah.
But for instance, I just got my purple belt in jiu-jitsu, which
congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And it didn't mean a damn thing to me, Philip. I gotta be honest with you. I didn't even take a picture. Like usually you take a picture with your professor or whatever, and they're like, "You want a picture?" I'm like, "Nah, I don't care." And I'm just like, Am I too far the other way now? Like, am I not appreciating anything now about the climb? Like, am I afraid to appreciate it? Because I'm afraid of that feeling afterwards.
In this case, I think the belt is just a symbol of your achievement. Mm-hmm. And you're probably at an age when you don't necessarily even need that outward symbol. You're doing jiu-jitsu, I assume, because you love it. And it's more important that you're enjoying the moment of the now. You're doing your jiu-jitsu, you're thriving. It's like me on the tennis court. I know how that feels when you're in the zone, right? And you're just loving what you're doing and where you are, and you're completely focused on it. And it's wonderful. It happens to me when I'm writing as well. So when you have that activity, you can just steep yourself in. It's a very Zen thing. So for you, the belt is just a symbol. And I think that's okay to not necessarily have that crutch anymore. It's like, it's
Yeah.
nice to have that acknowledgement and have other people realize it's a statement of where you've arrived in a sense. But don't you think it's much more important to go to jiu-jitsu and learn and keep
The habit of it.
improving and all of that? So the belt is just the outward symbol.
Yeah, and it's also kind of like I'm gonna do it either way. Like I'm gonna go do whatever I want to. Like I do it because I want to do it. So like whether or not it's a white belt or a blue belt or purple belt, or whether or not it's the greatest read of my life, right? I'm still gonna read every day because that's what I do. So I'm just gonna continue to show up and continue to do these things. So in some ways, I do think that I've done a better job of living in the moment, and maybe that has led to a little bit more comfort and peace in my life. But I almost feel uncomfortable being comfortable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So.
Yeah, unfortunately, it does. Yeah.
Derry has a great question. Says, here's a question for you both: are readers inherently more capable of compassion than non-readers?
Whoa. Okay. Huh. I'll start, and Jimmy, I'd love to hear your response too. I think that reading can help you to be more compassionate, for sure. But that doesn't mean that non-readers are not compassionate. And there are other ways of learning compassion. I know some people in my life who are not readers who are very compassionate. I can learn compassion from them. So I would say that reading can help you to learn compassion. In my life, it's been a very important tool for learning compassion. But I don't think it's necessarily. So, what do you think?
I don't necessarily know if it's more capable, but they have more means at which to expose themselves to those themes and to the ideas of compassion and empathy. I definitely know that it has affected me, but I also I'm going to say I do not think they are more inherently capable. I just think there's some correlation, but not necessarily causation, which might be a hot take talking in front of a couple hundred readers that I don't, but I almost feel like it's like
lukewarm take there, Jimmy.
I don't know. I feel almost like that's too much of a bias for me to say, yes, we're all way more compassionate. Like, yes, I do know. And maybe some of the most empathetic people and compassionate people, lovely people that I know are readers, but I've also met a lot of people who don't read a lick and are just absolutely wonderful. So,
yeah, no, I definitely know people who are not readers who are very compassionate, and it comes from various places. It could be their religion. It could be just some calling of theirs that they feel that they just makes them, or whatever. Some people are just more inherently, or maybe life experience too. I think can teach us when you go through something tough. You can become more compassionate toward people going through something similar, I think. So.
Yeah. I think traveling is probably one of the biggest things that you can do.
Big time.
It's to really open yourself up. But I'm gonna say something here. Maybe people won't agree with, but sometimes I think we're more compassionate to the fictional characters we read than we are to the people in real life. Sometimes I think there's a reverse. It's almost easier and more accessible to be compassionate and empathetic towards these fictional stories and characters and talk about these conversations where we're all getting along and everything than it is to actually go and practice that action, because it is an action to be compassionate in our real lives. So like, I'm really glad that I am able to read something that, makes me think and see things from a different perspective, but it means almost nothing if I do not take that and then apply it to my life, which is why I get really passionate and mad when people tell me that fiction has absolutely no benefit. And why would you read fiction? Because the best of readers, the best of us, which are obviously almost 200 of you here right now, and the thousands that are going to watch us after the fact, obviously we're all these people, but we take it and we apply it to our lives, which, I don't see how taking a lesson from something like a Realm of the Elderlings or a Lord of the Rings or whatever it might be is any different than someone taking it from myths or legends or, religious works of that nature, and taking that and letting that be something that they can apply to their lives. So, think about that. I think it's really easy to pat ourselves in the back and to extend empathy to these characters that are so gray and morally complex. But
Yeah.
It just so happens that the people who are morally complex in our lives are the ones that we think probably are wrong to their core and have different anything, different worldviews than us. And if you're able to extend it to those people, that's when you know that you've made progress and that you've made growth.
Yeah, I agree. That's beautifully said, Jimmy. Really beautifully said. And the fact of the matter is, a skilled writer like, Steven Erikson or Robin Hobb, again, what they can do with a character you initially don't like is give you their backstory, give you their inner thoughts, give you another perspective on those characters. In our daily lives, when we interact with somebody we think is a jerk, right?
Yeah.
We don't get their backstory. We don't get their inner thoughts. We just have that one interaction to base our assessment on, and it's usually not a happy one. So there's a lack of complexity in that interaction. And maybe if we were to stop and think, okay, well, that person just cut me off in traffic. All right. My initial response is, my instinct is, my amygdala kicks in and I'm like, you jerk, But if I think about it for a moment, well, maybe that person is in a hurry because they're on their way to the hospital. Maybe that person is having a really awful day. And, if you just think for a moment, get out of your default mode and think of that as like a character that you're getting to know their backstory. You're conjecturing about their backstory. I think that can open you up to being more empathetic, because you're right. Compassion is actually an act, right? Yeah. Whereas having empathy is trying to think your way into somebody else's place.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to come across preachy, by the way, because I fail every day at that. And I suck at it, to be honest with you, but I'm trying to get better. I think it was in Malazan, of course, when Steven Erikson had a line that kind of said that, like, compassion is basically, it's not a gift. Or, it needs to be something that is given whether we want to give it or not. And I'm paraphrasing, but that was a really profound moment for me. And I've actually had really great conversations with people and friends, and just talking about empathy and what it means to see the other side of things. And I can say that I got to have those conversations because of reading fiction, and in this example, fantasy, which is amazing.
Yep. And so I think that's what Derry was getting at with the initial.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So it's a really Ryan Nelson says, I believe anyone that cuts me off must have diarrhea. And you're acting with compassion there, Ryan. That's very good. I think that's fantastic.
Yes.
I might even use that myself.
look at this. That is perfect execution. Wonderful.
Yeah.
See, we're learning and we're growing together, folks.
We are. That's what community's for. That's what community is for. So
are you ready to read negative reviews of your book?
I mean, I have to be, right? So, I mean, that's.
Are you going to read them?
Am I going to read negative reviews? Yeah, why not? I think I have developed fairly thick skin over the years. Actually, being a booktuber is good practice for people throwing crap at you. So it's, I feel like I'm kind of sort of, I know it's not going to feel nice to read negative reviews or hear negative reviews. I've already decided that, I told Alan this when we were talking on Dear Dr. Fantasy, but I've already decided that I'm not going to comment on reviews, positive or negative, whether they're my friends or just other people I don't know very well. I feel like I want to give people their space. I'd have no problem with authors who do come in and say, when I've reviewed their book, thank you so much for reviewing my book, blah, blah, blah. I think that's very sweet. I have no problem with that. But I personally, since I know so many people here on BookTube, I want to give people their space and let them feel like they can say what they want to say. So I will not comment on reviews, but I will, if somebody wants to be in a discussion with me, I would be happy to discuss my books. So
to get the author's perspective.
Yeah, well, I hope I'll never come down and say, no, this is how you have to interpret the book. I want to be a little bit of a dead author. I want my readers to be able to interpret the books the way they want to. So I don't want to make the mistake of pushing certain interpretations out there, so.
Yeah. And I think also maybe it's a good exercise to sit and watch from afar and see maybe things that you intended to land, and if they did, right? Like if you're forcing everyone to see it your way, then I don't know. Now, 5, 6, 7 years down the road, you can come in and say, well, actually, like this, I think that is a great time to have a conversation. But right there at the beginning, I think you have to see how you did and what you wanted people to take away from it, right?
Yeah, and ultimately, once it's published and it's out there, it's out of my hands, So, and I'm happy with that. It's I'm pretty sure that long dead authors didn't intend a lot of the things that people say about their books, but sometimes they would say, that's kind of cool, or other times maybe they'd say, what, but that's all good, If people are talking about the book, that's a win for me, I think.
Are you more excited to see the reaction from people who do not know you?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm just excited to share the story, and if it turns out to be something that people find compelling, I'll be really happy. I'm actually weirdly, I think I'm more. I don't know. I am definitely eager to hear what my friends think. I don't know. It's a tough call to say which one I would be more eager to hear from, but I'm genuinely curious. I have my conjectures about who's going to like what parts and that sort of thing, because I think we know each other pretty well around here. And so there are certain things I think Jimmy would like that aspect of what I'm trying to do here.
So you're writing for me is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, it'll be. I'm excited to see the reactions, and I'm excited to kind of give my thoughts on it as well. I will be honest with you. I promise you that I have too much respect for you just to blow smoke. So it will be a legitimate opinion one way or the other. It might be awkward. Who knows? I hope not.
I don't think so. I think you and I know each other well enough for it to be just fine. And
yes.
I would expect nothing less from you. So,
yes. And you gave me very candid and honest feedback whenever I sent you my story. So I owe you one, in fact.
Yeah, you kind of do. And the fact of the matter is I gave you that feedback because I believe that you're somebody who will take that feedback and maybe I'm wrong about some things. I don't know. But I tried my best to give you constructive feedback to help you improve. And I feel that you're somebody, and I think a writer has to be this way. You can't be a good writer without being able to take in constructive feedback. You need to be somebody who's determined. I think determination is way more important than talent in just about any realm. And I think it's true of writing as well. Obviously, talent puts you at an advantage. But somebody who is determined is going to beat somebody who's merely talented. Of course, somebody who's talented and determined is going to do great. But in the long term, I think determination is way more important. And so if you want to get good at something, you work at it. And you've always struck me as somebody who's going to do that you're going to take what people say and you're going to take it in and what's valuable from that. And then you're going to work at it. And that's the only way you're going to get good at anything.
Yeah, it seems to be like a natural switch, at least for myself. Like if it's something I'm really passionate about, and like I know I've always had a pretty good sense of knowing where I'm supposed to be. The worst times in my life are whenever I don't have that sense. And when I'm doing something in the moment, I can tell if it's time for me to like sink in, give it my all. Right. And writing is one of those things that I there's something there. I know there's something there, but I don't know if I have the resources, aka time and energy at this moment to pursue that. So it feels like something I'm saving for down the road, but 100% I'm someone who takes that motivation and kind of runs with it. And obviously you are too, because you don't let the fact that you like editing actually is wild to me.
I love it.
That you have to have a pretty thick skin, I think, to be able to pick apart your own work, but then also have someone like AP who is not going to hold back and really give you things to work on. So that's another reason why I feel pretty confident about being excited about your stuff, because I know that you've put in the work and I know that you've also went down the avenues to get this thing polished. which
Right.
is tough because it is not a cheap venture. I cannot even imagine not just the time and energy you put into this, but also monetarily how much you've invested into this project.
It is not cheap to self-publish. I've spent a lot of money. Yeah. And energy and time. And I will say that to me, good writing is often more about avoiding bad writing than anything else. And that's why I think revising is so important, because you write something, ideally you put it down for a bit and you come back to it, and that helps you to see it, I think, a little more clearly that time.
Sure.
And so you get back to it and you think, oh my goodness, what was I doing here? Let me fix this. And then you go back to it again and you think, okay, this is good. And then, this is, what did I do here? And so you're constantly trying to weed out the bad writing in order to make it good. I think that's the secret to great writing is really to editing out all the bad stuff as much as you can.
What was the longest period of time that you took in between times of working on your story?
Probably about a year.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I keep saying it's been an 18-year process, but I haven't been writing constantly for 18 years, mostly in the summers, frankly, when I have time, which is a good way to do it if you don't mind being old when you publish. So.
Well, I think it's a better time than any, to publish now, and you have a booktube channel growing and whatnot. This really could end up becoming something of another career for you in a different phase of your life. And the beautiful thing about writing is that you have so much experience now that you're a little bit older. And I have found that the more I put time into working on things that I can do with this rather than this, I have felt more secure that as I get older, I will remain happy and I'll remain motivated, and there will still be new horizons for me to overcome. So, I mean, it has to be considering all the things that you have done, not just getting your PhD, but then becoming a professor, and then becoming a husband, and becoming a father, and now becoming an author. Have all those other roles informed this new phase that you're about to enter?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And by the way, I wouldn't advise anyone to not write. In other words, don't wait until you feel like you have enough experience, or until you feel like you're good enough to start. The only way to get good at something is to do it. So write. If you want to be a writer, if you want to write books, don't wait. Especially if you hear a story calling you. If the story's calling you, don't ignore it. Just sit down, and even if it's just a page a day, or a paragraph a day, whatever. Don't let it sit on the back burner. If you feel it calling, you got to pay attention to it. So waiting until you're smart enough or you're experienced enough, whatever, you're not going to necessarily publish the first thing you write, but it's the only way you're going to get to the point where you feel like you're going to be able to publish what you write is to practice, to keep at it. Just like with any other activity, just like with tennis, just like with weightlifting, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, you name it. You've got to do it on a fairly regular basis in order to get good at it. So yes, don't be afraid to be bad at something. That's Jenny's wisdom there. Yep.
And you got to get over that shame, like we talked about earlier, the shame of or embarrassment of being bad at something.
Yeah. Oh, I hoped I hope that no one will ever see my first draft of my novel, because I can assure you that it was bad in very many ways. So
that could provide a lot of inspiration to people.
I suppose. But it would be too embarrassing for me. So
we will not be getting that video over on the Best of Fantasy, unfortunately.
No, that would be the worst of fantasy.
The worst of it. It was the best of fantasy and the worst of fantasy.
Yeah.
David Sloan asked, dinner party with any 3 authors in history, who you guys choosing?
Oh my goodness.
I can go first if you want.
Oh, please do, because I got to think about it.
Okay. I would go with Paul, who wrote the most books of the Bible, and I would go with R. Scott Baker, And
That's
then
going to be interesting already.
and then I would go with Clive Barker, which I have actually not read much from Clive Barker, but I feel like he would be a good in between. Like, I don't know why, but that just sounds like a great conversation. And probably would end up with like punches being thrown or something. I don't know. It just seems like it would be high octane and I'd be there for it. I think I would enjoy it a lot.
Wow. Well, one author comes to mind, but I actually have had dinner with, and you have too, Jimmy. It's Stephen Erickson.
Humble brag. I like it.
Yeah. Not even humble. It's just bragging.
Just straight up braggadocious. I love it.
Yeah. And it was really cool. He's every bit as awesome as his books are. So it was really a wonderful experience. So I don't know. I've always felt that Tolkien would be a standard answer for me. And I'm scared that Tolkien wouldn't like me very much, but
that's all. Like I totally get what you're saying, because like Amita, I was like, oh, Cormac McCarthy, but then I was like, I'll be honest, he kind of seems like a dick. Like, I like.
Yeah, I don't think that way about Tolkien so much, but I don't know. I mean, the guy was just so brilliant, and I would be scared of meeting him. But I think he was a kind-hearted person too, though. So I don't think he would be mean or anything. But yeah, Cormac McCarthy, I don't know.
I feel like he would just grunt a lot.
Yeah, I've seen him interviewed before, and he doesn't say a whole lot.
He doesn't say much.
Yeah.
If I wanted that, I could go down to the local McDonald's for breakfast and sit next to a grumpy old dude and have him grunt at me. I don't think Cormac McCarthy is going to be like, yeah, here's my motivations for Blood Meridian. Like, I don't see that happening. So it's funny because some of my favorite authors probably wouldn't be people I'd want to have dinner with. Now, I would like to have dinner with George R. R. Martin because I'd learn all about like tugboats.
He would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah. He would talk about anything other than Winds of Winter. He would talk about the Jets football, Giants football.
Of course.
Night of Cooters, which they're making a TV show for now.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know who would be cool to sit down and have a beer with is Geoffrey Chaucer, for sure. Canterbury Tales. He's my man. Geoffrey Chaucer just was one of the most brilliant observers of humanity. Like, he's like the first novelist in so many ways. And I feel like he would be somebody who would have a lot of funny stories to tell and would be saying, telling stories about people in the tavern. And, that would be a lot of fun for sure. And we don't know who wrote Beowulf, so I can't say the author. I guess I could say the author of Beowulf and ask him a few questions. Did you really mean this?
Oh, Carlos says Oscar Wilde is a must. Yeah.
Oh, he would be brilliant. Yeah.
That's a really good one. I would also maybe just have like Tad Erickson and Christopher Rocchio on, because I've already talked to them and I know they like me. So
there you go.
That would be a lot more comfortable.
They've, of course, probably all, talked with each other at various conferences and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I would say that definitely possible. I think Tad and Steven definitely have, for sure.
Yeah, I've seen a video actually with the two of them on the same panel. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's delightful. I know I watched the one panel. It was Rothfuss. I want to say it was like Kevin Anderson. I can't remember the other person, but it was Rothfuss, Hobb, and Erickson. And I just wanted to hear Hobb and Erickson talk.
And Rothfuss talked
would not shut his mouth. Like, no shade. I'm not throwing shade or salt at the guy, but like at one point he says something and Hobb kind of like looks at him like, what are you talking about? And he goes, you don't agree? And then instead of letting her answer, he just continues to talk. And I'm like, I want to hear her respond, dude.
Yeah, I've seen the video where Stephen Erickson was on a panel with Patrick Rothfuss and a bunch of other authors. And it was like a lot of Patrick Rothfuss talking. Stephen Erickson just kind of looking like, okay.
Well, yeah, Erickson's not one that's going to shut anybody down. He's going to say his piece and hang out. He's a pretty relaxed guy. Matthew asked when I'm getting back into Shadow March by Tad Williams. I'll be starting book 2 fairly soon. I would say within the next 2 to 3 months. I'm wrapping up some stuff. I got to wrap up the Lycanius trilogy, and I don't know, Shadow March might be next. I'm supposed to read the rest of Northern Sky, which is Spider and the Cuckoo by Leo Carew, but I cracked open the prologue for the Spider, and I'm going to be honest, I thought it was not very good, which lessened my hype for that series like quite a bit, because like I was like, mostly positive on book one. And one of the reasons why I like the wolf, because I always say it wrong, woof, is the fact that he used a lot of alliteration and similes. And I actually enjoyed his writing quite a bit, even though it faded throughout the book a little bit. The Spider's prologue did one of my least favorite things in the world, which is in the dialogue go, "You mean so-and-so, our greatest enemy?"
Oh no.
It's like this didn't happen very much, if at all, in the first book, and then the second book's opening up. And there's something, as you know, we read a lot of series, right, Philip? Like we're always reading book 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s. Have you noticed this? That there can be a drop off, like maybe the story's fine and maybe even gets better, but there are times when authors had 10 years to work on book 1, and then they have to get book 2 out within a year or two, and you see a decline within the prose. I love R. Scott Baker, but I felt that his writing suffered a little bit in books 2 and 3 compared to book 1, as far just like little things like the repeating of Death Came Swirling Down, even if it was intentional. Like I felt, because he even said that he had a long time to craft book 1, and then getting book 2 and 3 out was like really difficult, because I think he might have been in his PhD program at that point. Like he might have been writing. Yeah. So, and I don't know if that's that's fact, but I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes you can see things that aren't consistent with the quality of writing in a book too. Like, have you seen that happen before?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Definitely. And I think that you nailed it, really. I mean, that's just what happens often when you've had so long to, and I can only conjecture in Rothfuss's case. So I mean, we were just poking fun at him. I love his writing. I think Name of the Wind is a beautiful book in many ways, but I think that The Wise Man's Fear was a little bloated, and he probably heard a lot of the criticism of that, and then maybe that froze him, and he doesn't know how to get book 3 out at this point. So that's a thing for sure. The ability to work on that first book, make it perfect, and then have that be your entry. In a way, I guess I'm glad that I had 18 years to work on all 3, actually 4 books. Yeah. So that's probably helpful, but yeah, I think that you can see different things. Like you can see within a trilogy, a kind of drop off. You can also see in certain writers, they get better and better and better. Like Abercrombie to me, and John Gwynne is another one I see getting even better and better. A lot of writers get better as they go. I would say Steven Erikson too. If you compare The Crippled God to, Gardens of the Moon, which I still love Gardens of the Moon, but I think he definitely, he would agree. He got better and better and better as a writer. So.
I did kind of mention that whenever I had him on Chat with Nuts, and I felt like he kind of gave me like a like kind of like, oh, interesting. Like I don't know if he agreed with me, because I was like, I can just see, like, I feel like you're getting so much better with each book, and he's
Well, like, he himself has said there are a couple things he would do differently than he did in Gardens of the Moon.
I see.
I believe he said that, and that in that sense he changed as a writer. You can't help it, really. I think you can't help changing, evolving as a writer. It's not like a drastic change necessarily. There are very few writers who can write from one book to another something that's very different. Like Susanna Clarke wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and then comes out with Peter Nazy. They could be written by 2 different people. They're both brilliant, but that's a rare thing. That's a very rare thing. It's like actors, right? So there are certain actors that they're great actors, but they always play the same person. They play themselves, essentially, or an exaggerated version of themselves, like Jack Nicholson. He's great, but he always plays Jack Nicholson. But you take a guy like Daniel Day-Lewis, or an actor like Meryl Streep, they could play your mother and you wouldn't even know that it's not your mother. Both of them could, and that's a rare talent. That's a rare thing. So I feel like most authors, they have a certain author persona. They have a certain way of writing, but it will evolve more gradually.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting, because a strong authorial voice is, especially within like literary fiction, is a really good thing. And in fantasy, sometimes I see readers kind of buck back on it a little bit. But it's interesting because it's generally considered a pro, right? If you like the voice, or that it's distinct enough to know exactly who wrote what sentence. But it does seem as time goes on that it almost becomes a cliche of the person's writing, maybe. And people start to say, well, this is too much like the last one. Abercrombie gets this a lot for his Little People chapters. He is a tool that he goes back to time and time again with combat to jump into these essentially nobodies and almost like a chain of deaths. And I love it. Some people feel like he does it a little too often, or everyone's a little too snarky. And that's interesting. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that, because I understand the idea of being burnt out about a certain voice, but it just seems like over time that it loses its luster a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you have to explore it in new ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I felt that with Abercrombie, for example, in the First Law trilogy, he did that thing you were just talking about with the during battle scenes where you'd have action, and switching, head hopping and all that sort of thing, and it gave a certain immediacy and thing we were talking about earlier, chaos, all that. He applies that technique to other things besides battle in the later books. And like in Age of Madness, there are certain scenes where he's building up tension and it's not a battle, but he's using that technique. And I think it's brilliant, So he's using that technique and applying it in new ways. And I think you have to push yourself as an author to do stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is part of being not just like an author, but an artist, and being someone that makes creative works, is that you always have to kind of come back and reinvent yourself. Like even in music, like the people who stick around the longest are the people who can change and can adapt and reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy thing to do at all.
No, it's not. I mean, it's a little sad when you see certain musicians or groups that are still doing the same old, but they're like 30 years older and there's nothing, it's a little sad. It's a little pathetic. Yeah, honestly, I think.
Philip's taking shots.
Unless you're really into that band, I guess. But then there are some bands that can continuously reinvent themselves, and and they come out with, and I think it would be boring, honestly, to be a musician still singing your greatest hits 30 years later. Yeah, the fans love to hear that same old tune again and again, but I would be bored.
Is that like the musician's way of quiet quitting? Just doing bare minimum. You know what I mean? Like,
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's an easy check, I guess, to do a concert and do the same old, as long as people are willing to go. But I think you would get bored as an artist if you're not creating something new. Yeah. Right.
I would agree. As long as you still have that fire. But sometimes, you get that big check and it gets a lot harder to get out of bed at 5 a.m. It's one of those things. We see it happen to a lot of people in combat sports. They kind of lose that dog a little bit, and it's just the way it's the way it goes.
I mean, if you look at the contrast, two of the greatest bands ever, you got the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. I would argue that it was a good thing for the Beatles that they broke up when they did, and that the Rolling Stones, they had some good years there, but their later stuff is nowhere near as good as their earlier stuff, and so and I'm sure there's people out there who are going to disagree with me, but
you're going to get some angry comments from
probably. Sorry to all the Rolling Stones fans out there.
It's always a good thing to leave before you've worn out your welcome. Always have people kind of wondering what if.
Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah. And Darius was so right. So David Bowie is a good example of somebody who's constantly reinventing himself, right? Who constantly reinvented himself, as a musical artist. And I respect that. So.
Yeah, definitely. Danny Matson with the 5 spot says, love you two guys. Thank you for all the content. Always sorry, just popped in to say that I have no idea what topic is being discussed. Danny, thank you so much. It's very generous of you. And we love you as well. Well, Philip, we've been going on just a little over 2 hours. I know your time is now super precious because you're a big shot author, a debut author, and you're going to sell 100,000 units probably first week.
Oh my goodness. Well, then I'll have to rethink that whole retirement plan, I guess, right?
That's so true. Yeah. That actually is a good question. Is there a certain amount of like books that will be prepared? Like, is there figures that you're expecting? Like, is there any kind of forecast or no? Okay.
No, I have no idea. I have no idea, and I'm trying to keep my expectations relatively low. I think it'll depend. If it gets some momentum, then it can go places I might not even dare imagine. But I'll be happy just to have an audience, and that's all I'm hoping for, really. So,
yeah. Well, I think you're definitely gonna have an audience, my friend. I think a lot of people are not just excited to see what you've been having in the kitchen, what's been in the oven for almost 2 decades, but also just to support someone doing something they love and that they're very passionate about. And I know that I am very, very excited for this. And I can't believe it's been like 9 months since you've been on here, by the way. So
has it been that long? Wow.
Dude, I see you're on everyone's channel. Like every time I go to a description, it's like something talk show with Philip Chase. And I'm like, when do you sleep, dude?
I mean, I do sleep, but
like, do your family ever see you? Like, I feel like you are the most collabed with person in our sphere.
Am I? You think?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I love collaborations. I love talking with people and learning from people, and so this is joy to me. I mean, I get a lot from these interactions. So it's maybe that's why I do it so much, I guess. But that's why I came here. I wanted to be part of a community and talk about books and learn from people. So this is a dream come true. So yeah, just to answer Derry's question, it is print on demand. So yeah, that's all. Cool. That's the way it works pretty much for through Amazon KDP and also Ingram Spark. It's all print on demand. So yeah, no wasted trees.
No wasted trees, and unlimited amount of books could be printed, ? Maybe.
Yeah. And they're happy to print them out when people order them. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I look forward to my copy, and you're always collaborating and you're always giving your time. So I'm excited to give some of my time and carefully read through your books to dissect them on my channel for hopefully what will be a positive review.
We'll see. you are getting an arc, my friend.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, you are getting an arc. And I will be very happy to hear whatever your thoughts are. And also, I am always happy to talk to you anytime. This is a joy to me, and you are a very dear friend, and I value this more than I can say.
Absolutely. I love you, man. And you have been one of the biggest blessings since I started this channel. And I remember very vividly us both leaving the airport after meeting each other and the tight hug we had. And I just said, wow, I can't believe things fell in place for me and you to become friends and to meet each other. And now I get to see you take one of the biggest steps of your life. And that's pretty excellent as a friend of yours, man. So I'm proud of you. And I think we all are. And we're rooting for you.
Thank you, my friend. And I am so grateful and happy to have you here with me.
Hell yeah, man. And this is only the beginning. I can't wait for the sequels and the new author arc. And this is the first stop on Philip's book tour. I just officially donned at his book tour right here, right now. And we are so happy that you were here to experience this on Chatting with Nuts, episode 47. Hit a like on the video if you don't mind. And make sure that you're subscribed to Philip's channel so you can get all the updates for when Philip's books are dropping. We're going to get all 3 this year. We're going to have audiobooks out late summer for the first book, with Alan from the Library of Alexandria narrating, which is a risky move, I got to say, because he actually has to read a book to narrate it, and Alan doesn't read. So that's a dicey situation you put yourself into.
You had to work in an Alan blow there at the end.
Just a little big.
Poor Alan. Yeah.
He'll take it in stride. He always does. But Phil, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to reading your book and having you on again real soon, man.
All right. Bye, everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, chat. We love you. And until we see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always